Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Mankiewicz. Tonight, we've been looking at films made by U.S. Navy Captain John Ford during World War II. Back with me to help introduce our next film is author and film historian Mark Harris. Mark's book, Five Came Back, details the efforts of five great Hollywood directors, Ford, Capra, Wyler, Huston, and Stevens, to make effective wartime propaganda for the government. Welcome back, Mark.
Thanks, Ben. It's great to be here.
We're going to shift our focus here, take a look at the first feature film Ford made after the war. It's from December of 1945. John Wayne, Robert Montgomery, and Donna Reed star in They Were Expendable. As far as Ford's first movie after he got out of the service, it really had to be a war picture about the Navy, didn't it?
It really did, but when They Were Expendable came out, which was after the war in Japan and the war in Europe was over, it was really kind of out of step with its time. Hollywood had made a lot of movies about the war in the Pacific in 1942 and 1943, but audiences had kind of tired of them, and Hollywood itself had moved on to concentrating on the war in Europe. Ford really had never moved on. His first war experience was in the Pacific in 1942, and that war, before we were in Europe, when it was the job of the American Navy to hold back the Japanese advance through the Pacific as long as possible, almost always going down to defeat in those first 6 months while the U.S. Navy was rebuilding its fleet after Pearl Harbor. That particular kind of heroism, the heroism of the men who knew they were expendable, is what moved Ford the most about his experience in the war.
Isn't it amazing that a movie that comes out just December of 1945, it's 4 months after we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, the notion that then we were already tired of seeing a movie about that time is amazing. I guess it's understandable, but this movie was not successful.
No, I mean, I think it's a good reminder that in so many ways movies are slaves to their original release date. And, you know, we can look at this movie 70 years later and see, I think that, for my taste at least, it's one of Ford's greatest movies and one of the great movies about the war in the Pacific, maybe the greatest. But at that moment of release, many critics said, sort of almost wistfully, gee, it's a shame this couldn't have come out a year or two ago when it would have mattered and been interesting. Now it just feels like a relic.
We're hesitant to use the word propaganda. You're not in the book, of course, but look at what critics were saying. It would have been useful if this had come out a year or two ago. Everyone was ready and eager for propaganda. Like, a critic saying that is acknowledging this would have helped us a year or two ago.
Yes, but I think they were also saying in some ways that this was a movie about loss. It's a movie about saying goodbye. It's a movie about leaving your men behind, knowing that you may never see them again because the odds are against them. And at this, you know, hard-earned triumphal moment, it felt like the worst possible time to remind people what the war had cost. Nobody in 1945 wanted to think about 1942 anymore.
Nobody wanted a hopeless moment at the most hopeful time the country had had since the onset of the Depression.
Exactly right. But Ford himself was, I think, very moved by the nobility of effort in the face of almost certain defeat. It's something that you see a lot in the Westerns that he made after the war, which aren't, of course, World War II movies per se, but which contain, I think, some of his feelings about the Second World War in them.
All right, well, thanks, Mark. Keep that in mind as you watch. With a cast that also includes Ward Bond, Jack Holt, and Marshall Thompson, here are John Wayne and Robert Montgomery in They Were Expendable.